Simon 係一個社工，佢就試過幫一個client 去戒毒。佢從個人層面咧就處理咗好多問題，但係只要 Simon 一返到自己，對唔住，只要佢嘅 client 一返到自己生活裏邊，包括係家庭同埋朋輩嘅影響，同社會支援不足咧，就會好容易再復吸。Simon 覺得係好無奈，好似覺得如果唔能夠改變社會制度咧，就點樣都幫唔到啲弱勢嘅個別人士。咁 Simon 想問點樣去面對呢個狀況呢？
Thank you for that question, Simon. And Simon, in many ways, I think that you are speaking for perhaps all of us, or at least most of us. I would say that, well, I would wager that one of the most common experiences of anybody working in a helping profession is a great sense of helplessness. And there's so much that could be said about that. The first thing is, consider this, Simon, that the agony of the helplessness that we feel in our work faced with certain kinds of clients is relative to the size of the goal that we impose upon ourselves, the size of what we expect to be able to accomplish single-handedly. Which in a way is quite a setup for deep frustration, deep feelings of pointlessness and failure. I don't think that we can ever fully appreciate what it is that drives another human being to a drug addiction, to the profoundly self-destructive lifestyle of a drug addiction. We'll never really fully appreciate that unless we've been through some kind of desperate drug addiction ourselves. But even then, we can't fully understand what drove that particular specific individual to their self-destructive addiction, what trapped them in that place. What kind of nightmare, emptiness, agony, fear, or horror do they carry inside that is so terrible and so unrelenting that taking drugs on a regular basis with all of the full recognition of that is destructive to us in our relationships, we choose that over feeling the nightmare that we are carrying inside. So it's important to understand that we don't understand. We empathize, we care, but that we can never fully understand the background of the person. If we don't accept that, then we get hooked in terms of a very potentially very burdening or even crushing expectation of what we should be able to accomplish, that I should be able to cure you of your addiction. I mean, of course, sometimes that happens, but every single case is completely different and discontinuous from the last. Now, where does the inner child, our own childhood story, come into play with that self-disappointment and expectation? You know, how did we learn? I think this is where it's important to begin an internal quest for the sake of our own heart, our own well-being, to really use those moments of pain in our work as beginnings. Open the door of that moment and take a quest inside. Ask yourself something like this: how did I learn? How did I come to learn in my life? Or how did I absorb the message that it's all up to me? Perhaps it's different. When did it become very important to me that I be potentially heroic in another person's life? What were the rewards for my heroism as a child growing up, perhaps? Why did I need that? Why was that important? Why was my value dependent on my heroism or saving someone else or rescuing someone else? Because that's sometimes it's an issue to do with that. Very, very common in the helping professions. If you understand family systems as children, when there is conflict in the family and ongoing chronic conflict, children, we end up adopting a kind of a role inside the family, and it becomes chronic, and we become trapped, seriously trapped inside that role. There's always somebody, the child that's the sick child, or the victim child, or the rescuer child, or the helping child that's always there for way past their own real age, there to help mum and help dad with their pain and help the other kids and rescue. And we get migrated into these positions and get stuck, and it's a kind of a emotional survival mechanism. And all of us have something of that story from our childhood. Very, very often people in the helping professions like me, we've been trying to heal people since we were little children. Somehow life said, it's up to you. If you don't, someone will be hurt. What that does, if we don't make that very conscious and begin that as a healing process, we are trapped. We don't gain more choices, because freedom from our past would look something like this. I care for my drug addicted client deeply, and if what I'm doing isn't enough, I refuse to be alone. And I will accept that sometimes it takes 4 or 5 or 6 people helping. One is sometimes, often actually, not enough. And Simon, you said something else, and I really agree with this, because I've come to that conclusion so many times in my work. Some of our clients are so deeply entrenched in their toxic habits, habits of behavior, habits of thinking and attitude, habits of relationship, so deeply embedded in that it won't suffice to treat them and then send them back to the same environment that they're inside of. That the environment that they're in needs to be altered, either by convincing them to move somewhere else, to have different friends, to get away from toxic relationships, or to involve ourselves in the kind of community work that creates new tribal healthy environments, because we're creatures of a society. There are occasions in which it's impossible to change unless there is a supportive change in our circumstances, that people come with us to that change, that growth is usually shared. Okay, it's shared. It's not just, we're not separate individuals floating in space. We're deeply interconnected. So some of the deepest agonies of helplessness that we feel comes from the presumption that A, it's all up to us alone, and B, that we are alone, that we don't deserve teamship. And remembering that just brings such great relief. I want to say one final thing about that. Very often, if you're working a lot with people with severe substance addictions, you will find yourself needing to let go, and that some people will change, some won't. Please do not ever underestimate that if you sit with an addict and you have some open, honest, empathic conversation and help them to feel seen, heard, and understood, and you allow your heart to show your care and your empathy, even if that person tries hard to give up their drugs and they fail and they might even die, but they will remember you. That's already created a change. So it's important for us not to get addicted to a specific narrow version of what change would mean for our clients, because authentic, heart-centered human interaction stays with people forever. Even if their life is shortened, they have a body memory of you perhaps being the first person that really, really, really listened to them, and it will start to shift their sense of worth, their sense of value. What is very sad for therapists, social workers, counselors, etc., is that very often, very, very often, we won't get to see the ripples that we create, that we won't get to see how the story ends. Our clients finish with us and they go away, or we may not see them again. And we might have to live on without the feedback. Okay. I mean, I think about all of these things, and geez, it makes me realize how much in the role of therapists, counselors, we really need to continually maintain our own emotional state because of the challenges of this job. Thank you for your question, Simon.
I have two questions that would like to know more. The first one, is there any way we can notice that our old body memories have aroused by our client from our client's reaction during the session? And then number two, if during the session you notice that your old memories have aroused, what will you do at that moment when you still need to interact with your client? Thank you.
I love that question, and it's a complex question. There's two or three parts. Karen, can you help me here? Please tell me the name. I didn't quite hear the name of the person asking.
Chen Yan.
Can I call
Yan?
Yan.
Yeah.
Yan?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yan. Of course, it's not necessarily that you will know. There isn't like a magic and perfect way that you will know exactly each time what is your personal triggered reaction from body memory, from your childhood, from your past, as opposed to a genuine response, an emotional response to the truth in the present moment of what your client is going through. Sometimes that separation is quite blurry. I don't know for sure all of the time. There are some reactions in myself that I'm so familiar with now that I'm quite sure, yeah, that one's about me. But there's no substitute for continuing to be just really interested in your own process. Be interested. There's so many rewards that come from that. So that your own, this work is working with other human beings in a helping profession. There's possibly very few types of work that are more potent as like a launching pad for your own personal growth. You can grow as fast as your clients are growing if you just pay attention. So in other words, you'll be learning for the rest of your life, for the rest of your working life. about yourself. More and more and more, you will never arrive at full knowledge. It's never going to happen. There's always more to learn. That's a beautiful thing. And so sometimes you don't know for sure, is this me or is this my client right now? I'm not. So there's no substitute for going home after work and then, in a supervision kind of intention, do your inner child work with yourself, with your own counselor sometimes. I want to share with you, sometimes I do this alone and quickly, just a short little inner child reflection for me. Sometimes it takes a minute. Sometimes when some deeper and more difficult feelings are triggered for me, I decide to then go and have a little bit more of my own therapy so that I can process those things more deeply. And then your question, Yen, got a bit more precise. Are there indications sometimes from your client's reaction? Again, I want to stress, it's not that you'll know for sure. I cannot offer this perfect instrument that tells you with exactitude every time. Just be interested, remain interested. Ask yourself questions. I like to use, for instance, when I notice my client's resistance, which all clients resist therapy from time to time. They'll either say so directly, or they'll refuse to show up, or they'll say, I don't like this, or they'll, see the body language, or they'll look distracted, or they'll be, scowling. There's so many levels of resistance, or they'll pretend to play along, but inside not really be motivated and engaged. And you often can detect that through the body language. All of that, the psychoanalytic school of psychotherapy called it resistance, but they make the resistance 100% about the client. And I think that's a terrible misconception. It's about the relationship. So it's unfair to blame our clients for resistance 100%, or to make it all about them. How do we know that their resistance isn't about us and our intervention? Something that we're doing too much or too soon that they're not ready for, or the expectations that we have of our clients. We get so tangled up with our clients. This has a name. It's called countertransference. When our clients project onto us, very common, that's called transference. The therapist will equally often project onto the client. That's called countertransference. Okay. So we fall into traps all the time. We expect too much from our clients. We want them to improve in order to give us relief. We want them to improve in order so we can feel good about ourselves and so we can feel successful. There's all these entanglements that happen. So often I use the yardstick, the indicator of my client looking a bit, I see their resistance. And on my way home that evening, to at least ask the question, I wonder what that was about. Could it have been something that I did, or my manner? What was I thinking at the time? And it's not, please don't think that that means I'm blaming myself. I'm not. It's a curiosity. It's in the spirit of curiosity. If you notice what's happening in your body doesn't lie. And when big feelings come up as you're listening to your client, if you may not, and you're not likely to have a real chance to pay attention to that fully in the middle of a session. Not always. Sometimes you can, but often you can't. And then remember that feeling that came up and sit with that at home. Do some inner child journeying. What does that feeling that came up for me? When my client said blah, 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 those big feelings that come up for me, what was that about for me? When my client looked very troubled, that feeling that came up for me, my own frustration, my own fear, my own helplessness, what does that remind me of? What did I need as a child when I was feeling that way a long time ago? Ah, no wonder. So Yen, thank you for your question.